Welcome back. All right. So, Dr. Wisdom, you're welcome to the show this morning. Dr. Enang, you are in the oil and gas sector. Looking at the excuse that the president have given that it is for protecting of rivers pipeline, which is a national asset, is one of the reasons why that decision was taken. Is it to say that other pipelines in other places have not been tampered with or affected? Is there a justification from this, even from the oil and gas angle?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you very much. Looking at the whole situation, I think it is more political than from a pipeline protection standpoint. Because I mean, when you look at the framework that I'd like to recommend for pipeline protection, I tend to call it the PDRR: protect, detect, respond, and recover. And the protect simply means, the predict, sorry, detect, respond, and recover. The predict simply means there are analytics and softwares that you are using and devices that you are using to sort of pick up trends and monitor situations. The detect means you're able to know that that's a real intrusion. The respond and recover simply means that there is an intrusion, there is a systematic breach of all of those protocols at the predict and the detect levels, and then you are responding. Now, where I'm getting at is the president has done respond and recover, but I have no clue if there were any predict and detect sort of protocols that were, overshadowed by the events and how they were overshadowed by the events. Now, the president alludes to the fact that there is an intelligence report suggesting that one of the parties sort of was, perhaps responsible for the pipeline, explosion, the trans pipeline explosion. However, there is no intelligence report suggesting that there were actually enough protocols on those security protocols on those pipelines, and that breach was actually as a result of this existing conflict. And even if there is need for a robust protection system that even when we envisage such political crisis, it doesn't always crystallize down into having vandalization of pipelines and of course loss of economic output for the nation.
Interesting. So, invariably, we can now say, we can say at this point that the president was right with his decision.
Well, we cannot say he was right with his decision, but what we can say is that there is no sufficient grounds to say that we have taken a robust approach to pipeline protection. And of course, as I said, there are different protocols. Even when you look at the respond and recover, the respond and recover is where you have even the security that are meant to go around the pipelines. If the security, for example, are not complicit in this, how would that barrier be broken? So think about three barriers here: the predict barrier, the detect barrier, the respond and recover barrier. Before any pipeline intrusion happens, all three are complicit. So my point is, rather than point out just one event as a probable cause, can we go into the root cause analysis and find out? And if you go deeper, you find out that we don't even have a robust pipeline protection in the first place. So this is just a very comfortable excuse, actually.
All right, but then, Dr. Ellen, before we even come back to the studio, a lot of people within the oil and gas sector has been mute, even with the president's decision right now. We thought that by now we will get people protests from Lupeng, them to Ipman, and also another association that also attached themselves to the oil and gas sector, but they've all gone silent. We've seen tankers being attacked, we've seen a pipeline being vandalized, and no state of emergency has been declared even in this regard. Is it that the oil and gas sector have been selective in their fight, even as it stands right now?
No, I don't think they're selective, and I think the leadership of the unions are probably weighing their options. They probably may not respond as quick as you're thinking. But ultimately, one thing that the union may be watching out for is to see, again, is the state of emergency declared by the president going to be all encompassing, that it solves the problem? But you see, the first thing I said was that this is just a sort of a situation where you have the lack of robustness in our protection systems meeting a situation, but doesn't really mean that it is one that caused the other. Both of them are mutually exclusive events, although happening within the same background and having a negative effect on the economy. So I think, cognizant of that, that the unions are actually wearing their options and perhaps would address this after they've monitored the situation, perhaps late into next week.
All right, so I asked that question because to a very large extent, I know that Ezema here in the studio will also agree with me that we have a lot of political parties coming out to kick against this decision of the president, and also we have a lot of stakeholders have come out to air their grievances and state what their position is even with this, but we've not heard even from the oil and gas sector people coming out to talk about this. But then let's even move away from that. Let's come back to the justification for this particular action as it stands right now. Will this further drive River State into a developmental strides, even with this in terms of gas explosion and pipeline vandalization? Would this quick decision further guarantee that there will be no loss of lives, no pipeline vandalization in River State, even with the emergence of the new administrator of River State? Or how would you assess it generally? Let me put it that way.
I mean, sometimes the constitution gives certain options, but you do not know how those options will play out. Just like we do not know how bad the effect of subsidy removal and flotation of the naira will be on our economy, and we learned the hard way. But my point is, one of the things that is going to drive development in River State has got to be the fact that people kind of are intentionally, right, made to understand that this is not a politically driven move. The guest in the studio did say that he did look at the angle of, okay, maybe the federal government trying to annex that state, and that apprehension itself, right, rightly so, is very bad for economic growth, because when people feel that when people are sold that ideology, and rightly so, that you're coming to take the state from them, there'll be resistiveness. And when there's resistiveness, we're going to have the age-long problem we have in oil and gas, which is if the host community are not comfortable with your operations, they will sabotage your operations, and it comes from within. So what is the job of the administrator at the moment is to pick all of these negative narratives and try and show that truly he's come there not to annex the state, but to fix the wrong. But on the sideline, right, making that happen is going to be using the 6 months as a platform for negotiating political resolution to this problem. You really do not want a situation, for example, let me give you a bit of context. You don't want a situation where there is a further inflammation of the situation within the 6 months. The 6 months should be a time to come to the round table, make a decision where both parties come back and then continue their work and work in peace. Of course, having tested how bad things can get. But if this 6 months is spent, again, trying to find a way to remove one party or the other, what is going to happen? That will fuel the resistiveness from River State and the lack of cooperation to the administrator, and that will not yield growth. So ultimately, the two components that I feel is really important is the administrator making sure that it's fair to all tribes. There's no kind of the demarcation of Ijaw or with other tribes, making sure that it's for rivers people. And then two, there being a political situation that is very, very kind of a safe landing and everybody goes home happy. Without that, the rivers people will never cooperate and there will be no good yield of democratic dividends.
All right. Let me wisdom. Are you still there with us?
Yes, loud and clear. I can hear you.
All right. So, Doctor Wisdom, from the oil and gas sector, I'm curious at this moment. Is River State the worst in terms of vandalism of pipelines as it stands right now, or how will you assess the pipeline vandalism in the southern part of Nigeria? And if you want to place that simultaneously with River State, can we say that the two pipeline vandalization that we've recorded so far was the worst so far in the entire southern part of Nigeria?
Oh no, definitely not. But it has sort of upset the steady state that we were. We're currently at a theft level of about 5,000 barrels per day, and that stayed consistent. But this recent explosion has kind of created further losses because, of course, the theft level translates to loss, and so even exploding the pipeline also translates to some economic loss. Some are tangible in the sense that you can count the number of barrels that you're losing, and the other is intangible in the sense that it's a further deterrent to potential investors. But we've got worst, events in the past. However, I think the Rivers case is just a litmus test. I like to say it's a litmus test of the fact that have we gotten our pipeline security right? And that is what I agree with what the gentleman is saying, that there needs to be a robust and non-political protocol for the protection of pipeline. So it's almost like somebody roofs your house and you're praying that one day you're able to test how robust that is, and then one day you have a very heavy downpour of rain, and then you're able to see some of the weaknesses. So, away from the political situation in Rivers, I think the president needs to really do what we call an RCFA, root cause fault analysis, and look at the pipeline protection systems themselves. There are still weaknesses which has only been unearthed as a result of the Rivers crisis. The Rivers crisis doesn't translate to doesn't translate directly to pipeline vandalism unless certain elements that are weak links across the protection value chain are broken, and we need to ask ourselves what are those protocols along the protection value chain and how do we fix it. So let's take this as a litmus test. But yes, it's a significant impact considering the levels of crude loss to theft and vandalism that were, which was $5,000. This is a significant one.
All right. So again, I'm asking that particular question to ask this exact question, which is the fact that River State right now, when we saw the speed in which those pipelines were repaired and were fixed almost less than 2 days they were repaired. It looks like a drama to me. So I'm curious again, have we worked out modalities within the oil and gas sectors that vandalism of pipelines can be fixed almost immediately, even if it's been exploded, even if it's been exploded?
Oh yeah, there are methods. I speak as a piping engineer. There are different means. You do know that they're functional, but you don't know if it's a temporary fix to bring up the functionality, or if it's a permanent fix. I mean, there's what we call hot tap, and you can hot tap and redirect your flow to a different line, and you can do that in half a day. It depends on the extent of damage. if the extent of damage is in a localized area, you can simply even use a hose or a pipe, a flexible hose and crude hose, and then kind of direct the flow of the crude. So there are a number of methods, and yes, it has been perfected because I'm a piping engineer, so I do know that. The only thing is this. Again, I keep talking to the elements of protection. I take you back to my preambles: predict, detect, respond, and recover. What do we see? We see a quick respond and recover. What happens to the predicting elements? What happens to all the intelligence signals that we ought to be getting? And remembering that once the political crisis was going up, we ought to have known proactively that we needed to increase our levels of surveillance on these pipelines, because that was the primary target. So when you look at your risk screening, even in the UK, they look at risk level, they look at the green level, no risk, the amber level, which is little risk, potential risk, and then they look at the red level, which is a very, very active risk. So who was saddled, just like the guest in the studio alluded to, who was saddled in the security agency for making the call and saying, look, we're going to have a potential, I think we should take the security protocol on amber and start increasing surveillance. Because that would have increased the prediction on those pipelines, the people that are going around and all the signals that are meant to ensure that they predict any intrusion. And then there would have also been a different detection. So for me, the respond and recover is more of a reactive move, however fast, right? It doesn't tell us how to proactively ensure that we increase pipeline surveillance and protection in tandem with what is happening in the socio-political setting of the state. And that, to me, is where the failure of this whole pipeline protection system stands.
All right, thank you so much for that feedback. All right, we'll come back to you, Dr. Wisdom Morning. I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Enang Wisdom, an oil and gas expert, for being part of the show this morning. All right, viewers, don't forget that you can join the conversation on our social media handle showing on your screen right now at Global TV NG. You can also download the Global TV app on Android and iOS devices to keep track of our broadcast. I am Godwin Sunday. Always remember that peace and unity are the pathways to progress. From all of us here in the studio, it's bye for now.